The mystery of the bazooka, why the USSR rejected America's deadly gift that could have changed the war. A call to action right away, before the most interesting part begins. Hey, friends, before you dive into this story, which is more gripping than any spy thriller, do two simple things that will help us grow. First, subscribe to the channel. Here, we break down the most hidden, most controversial, and most captivating pages of history that you won't find in textbooks. Second, write your opinion in the comments from the very start. Did your grandfathers argue about Lend-Lease? What do you think about the decisions of Soviet generals? Your perspective matters because history is not a set of dates, but a living discussion. And now, get ready. We are about to peek behind the scenes of World War II, where not only armies clashed, but also ambitions, technologies, and cunning calculations. Two boxes that could have changed everything. Imagine the winter of 1943, bitter cold, chilling to the bone. Somewhere near Moscow or on a closed testing ground, a group of Soviet officers and engineers stand, their faces tense. Before them are unremarkable, long cardboard tubes, just arrived from across the ocean. These are not just weapons. They are a symbol of help from a mighty ally, already paid for with the blood of sailors in the Arctic convoys. Inside, the legendary American M1 Bazooka rocket launchers. A weapon that, according to rumors, is already sowing panic among German tank crews in Africa. The fate of thousands of lives and the outcome of individual battles seem to depend on these cardboard boxes. Pulling the trigger could have been the start of a new era in the Red Army's anti-tank warfare. But what if I told you that at this very moment, looking at these gifts, experienced Soviet military men felt not hope, but cold anxiety? What if this was not an act of friendship, but a subtle, deadly game? And most importantly, why did these bazookas, thousands of which smashed tigers and panthers on the Western Front, practically never fire at the enemy in the East? The answer to this question is a puzzle of steel, politics, human lives, and monstrous miscalculations. This is a story not only about weapons, but about how alliances were tested in the crucible of war, along with machines. If you're ready to learn the truth, keep reading. I promise you will never look at Lend-Lease history the same way again. What is the bazooka and why did it shock the world? To understand the scale of the disappointment, one must understand the initial delight. Let's go back to the early 40s. The world of tanks was then undergoing a real revolution. Armor was getting thicker, guns more powerful. An infantryman facing a steel monster felt almost helpless. Anti-tank rifles only pierced the sides of light tanks. Molotov cocktails required suicidal bravery and perfect circumstances. A fundamentally new solution was needed, and it came from the USA. The M1 Bazooka was, without exaggeration, a revolution. It was the first successful portable rocket launcher. Its operating principle was brilliantly simple: a long tube open at both ends with a rocket projectile inside. Pressing the trigger completed an electrical circuit from a battery, igniting the rocket's motor, and it flew out of the barrel. No complex mechanics, no recoil like a cannon. Why did the bazooka seem like a wonder weapon? Cheapness and simplicity. Its production did not require scarce high-alloy steels or complex machine tools. Essentially, it was a tube with a sight and a button. In the context of total war, where every hour on the assembly line was worth its weight in gold, this was a colossal advantage. Power. The early M1-shaped charge warheads penetrated about 60 millimeters of armor. For 1942, against the main German tanks like the early PZ-3 and PZ-4, this was enough. It gave an ordinary infantryman a chance to stop the steel beast. Mobility and convenience. Two soldiers, a gunner and a loader, could easily carry the launcher and several rounds. Learning the basics could take just a few hours. It didn't require the months-long training of artillerymen. It was this apparent simplicity that became the trap. The Americans, encouraged by their success in North Africa where bazookas burned light German and Italian tanks, hurried to share the technology with their allies. The USSR, waging the largest and bloodiest land war against thousands of German tanks, seemed the ideal consumer. The first batch, several hundred bazookas, set off on a long and dangerous journey via the Persian corridor or the northern convoys. It seemed like the solution had arrived. But here's where it gets interesting. The harsh Russian reception. Tests that shocked Soviet engineers. By 1943, the Soviet Union was not the naive recipient of aid it is sometimes portrayed as. It was a war machine, tempered in the crucible of the most terrible defeats and greatest battles. Every piece of equipment, especially infantry weapons, went through a sieve of ruthless testing. And the bazooka faced not a demonstration for generals, but a harsh, almost merciless examination at the proving grounds. What did Soviet specialists from the main artillery directorate see when they started to torture the American gift? The tragedy of speed, or a snail on the battlefield. The first and main blow to the bazooka's reputation, the projectile's flight speed. It was catastrophically low, just over 80 meters per second. For comparison, a bullet leaves the barrel at 700 to 900 meters per second. In practice, this meant the gunner had to wage a real sniper duel with a tank. To hit a moving target from a distance of even 200 meters, he had to lead by several tank lengths. And if the tank fired back, the bazooka projectile flew so slowly that an experienced enemy gunner could theoretically see it and have time to react. In real combat, under fire, this reduced the probability of a hit to a minimum. The deadly tail. Flame, smoke, and burns. The bazooka's design was open. Propellant gases and flame from the rocket motor blasted backwards from the tube for up to 3 to 4 meters. This created a lethally dangerous zone behind the shooter. It was impossible to fire from a trench, from a cramped urban room. From bushes, everything behind would be scorched. Moreover, with the slightest wind or when firing at an angle, this flame and smoke could scorch the shooter's own face and hands. In American manuals, it was a dry line. Clear area to rear required. In the conditions of the Eastern Front, where every mound and shell crater saved a life, this was an unaffordable luxury. The temperamental princess. The temperature nightmare. This is where the real detective story begins. Soviet testers, accustomed to frosts of -30 and 40, quickly identified a fatal flaw. At temperatures below -10 degrees Celsius, the bazooka's electrical system, those very batteries and wires, began to fail. The projectile simply wouldn't launch. But that was only half the trouble. A much more terrifying phenomenon was discovered. Incomplete burning of the rocket motor inside the barrel. In heat, at +30, the propellant charge burned unevenly, creating colossal pressure. And in cold, it could, on the contrary, continue burning after leaving the barrel. The result? At best, the projectile flew nowhere with an unpredictable trajectory. At worst, a barrel rupture or the grenade exploding right in the shooter's face. Imagine the feelings of a soldier issued a weapon that could kill him at any moment, regardless of his skill. The problem of the bare tube. The M1 bazooka had no protective shield for the shooter. He held a bare tube in his hands, which could heat up to high temperatures upon firing. The risk of burns was enormous. The simplicity of the design backfired against the soldier's comfort and safety. What did the Soviet generals feel at that moment? Probably a mixture of fury and disappointment. An ally sends a weapon that cannot be used in Russian winter, Russian summer, or from a Russian trench. It's dangerous for the shooter himself. It requires ideal conditions that don't exist in war. Inevitable questions arose. Did the Americans know about these flaws? Are they sending us second-rate weapons, keeping the best for themselves? Or is it just negligence? Context: a one-sided game? Lend-Lease and the brutal economics of war. To understand the decision to refuse, we must step beyond the proving ground and look at the big picture. Lend-Lease was not charity. It was a government order, paid for with blood and future political concessions. Every ship, every plane, every tonnage cost incredible effort, and thousands of sailors lives in the cold waters of the North Atlantic and Arctic. And here we encounter another shocking fact. The Americans delivered to the USSR under Lend-Lease about 9,000 bazooka type launchers, M1 and the slightly later M1A1, an impressive number. But only about 450,000 rounds were supplied for them. A simple arithmetic calculation shows, on average, there were only 50 rounds per launcher. For training and adaptation, maybe enough. For equipping the infantry units of an entire army engaged in continuous combat along a front thousands of kilometers long, a drop in the ocean. It created the impression that the USA had made a gesture, transferred the technology, but did not provide the means for its mass use. The Soviet Union was offered either to request more ammunition, again spending tonnage, time, making concessions, or to establish its own production of shells for a complex rocket weapon, in the midst of a war when all resources were devoted to their own proven systems. And this brings us to the main point. The USSR already had an answer. While the bazookas were failing their tests, a different, quiet but grand work was boiling in design bureaus and factories. The domestic response, the genius of simplicity. The birth of a legend named RPG. Soviet military thought, having studied captured German Panzerfausts and been disappointed with the bazookas, went its own genius way. It was necessary to create a weapon that was absolutely reliable in any frost or heat, safe for the shooter, no rear blast, suitable for mass production and simplest training, powerful enough. And this weapon was created. Meet the RPG-1, and then the immortal RPG-2, Baryshchev grenade launcher. What was the genius of the Soviet design? The rocket-propelled grenade launcher. It's not a rocket. That's the key difference. The RPG used a round with an overcaliber grenade. A small propellant charge burned in the barrel, which simply pushed the grenade out, like from a mortar. Then the grenade flew by inertia. No burning motor in the barrel. No unpredictable rocket flame from the rear. The barrel remained cold and safe. Yes, the range was less than the bazookas, 100 to 150 meters versus a theoretical 450. But what is more important for an infantryman in real combat? Theoretical range at which he still won't hit a moving tank due to the low projectile speed, or a guaranteed, safe and accurate shot from 50 to 70 meters, which any soldier could manage after half an hour of instruction. Soviet designers chose the right path, reliability and mass production. The RPG became the infantry's workhorse. It could be produced by the thousands at not the most high-tech factories, could be issued to every squad, could be fired from a trench. It didn't fail in a blizzard or in the heat. A historical parallel. This is a classic example of differing military doctrines. The American Army, with its focus on technology, logistics, and fighting from long range, bet on technological sophistication. The bazooka is essentially a rocket. The Soviet Army, which had gone through Stalingrad and Kursk, where battles were fought at grenade-throwing distance, bet on the soldier and the weapon's reliability in the most hellish conditions. Whose doctrine proved correct in this specific niche? History answered, the Soviet one. The RPG and its descendants spread around the world by the millions and became a symbol of people's war. So was there a conspiracy? An analysis of motives and conclusions. Let's return to our main question. Was the rejection of the bazooka correct? With the benefit of hindsight, unquestionably, yes. The USSR saved tonnage for more needed cargo, explosives, aluminum, machine tools, trucks, did not waste soldiers' lives mastering a capricious weapon, and focused on developing its own, perfectly suited for its theater of war. And what about the motives of the USA? Did Washington know about the flaws? Most likely yes, but not fully. The American Army itself encountered the bazooka's problems in Europe, when it turned out its rounds bounced off the frontal armor of the new Panthers and Tigers. This led to the urgent development of the more powerful M9 and M20 Super Bazooka. Was the first model consciously offloaded on an ally as not the best? More likely it was standard war logic. An ally is sent what is available, what is already in serial production. The USA was solving its own tasks. The USSR was forced to solve its own. There was no idealism in Lend-Lease. There was hard-nosed pragmatism. Historical irony lies in the fact that bazookas did reach the front in very limited quantities and, according to some reports, in air defense units for firing at low-flying aircraft, where their drawbacks were less critical. But they never played their intended role as the infantry's anti-tank savior on the Eastern Front. That role was taken by the humble, reliable, unfailing RPG. Lessons of steel and fire. The The story of the bazooka is not just a technical curiosity. It is a vivid illustration of several eternal truths. There are no small details in war. Temperature range, length of the backblast, ease of reloading, these nuances decide whether a soldier will be alive 5 seconds after firing. The perfect is the enemy of the good. Soviet military men, having the advanced American novelty in their hands, did not give in to temptation. They preferred to wait for their own adequate solution. Sovereignty in war includes sovereignty in the choice of weapons. The ability to say no even to a powerful ally if their offer does not match your realities is a sign of maturity and strategic thinking. This story makes one wonder, how many more such bazookas, flashy, heavily advertised, but essentially useless in specific conditions, are being pushed on us today under the guise of aid or cutting-edge technology? Finale and call to action number 2. Our deep dive is coming to an end, but the discussion is just beginning. I've given you my version based on facts, tests, and the logic of war. But what do you think? Did the USSR have the moral right to criticize Lend-Lease aid? Could the mass delivery of bazookas in 1942, before the appearance of tigers, have changed anything? Do you know any stories from veterans who might have seen this weapon? Write your thoughts, memories, questions in the comments. Let's bring history to life together. And, of course, if this analysis was valuable and exciting for you, be sure to subscribe to the channel. There's more to come about Studebakers and Katyushas, about the Arctic convoys, about how Lend-Lease actually worked on the front lines. Give a like if you believe the truth is always more complex and interesting than myths. Share this story with friends. Let more people learn at what cost and with what intelligence our victory was forged. This was channel name / your name. See you next time in history.